Hey everyone, it's Bob Pulver. Welcome back to the show. Today on Elevate Your AIQ, I'm catching up with my friend Enrique Rubio, founder of Hacking HR, a top 100 global HR influencer, and one of the most authentic community builders in the people and talent space. Enrique has been driving change and increasing awareness through the growing Hacking HR community and well beyond, helping to bring humans together around purpose, learning, and transformation. This conversation is certainly no exception. Enrique shares the remarkable journey behind Hacking HR, from running global conferences on a shoestring budget and 10 laptops in his living room, which I witnessed myself, to building one of the most accessible, democratized learning communities in the world. We also dig into the critical gap he sees in today's AI landscape, not prompting skills, but the deep organizational, ethical, and governance capabilities companies desperately need as AI reshapes work. It's an energizing, candid, and important conversation, one that reminds us how much power HR has when it leads with integrity, courage, and a commitment to community. I'm thrilled to share this discussion with you, and it's quite timely as a complement to the insight-packed AI Experience Summit going on this first week of December 2025. As always, thanks for listening to Elevate Your AIQ. Let's go talk to Enrique. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I am your host, Bob Pulver, and with me today, I have the pleasure of catching up with my friend Enrique Rubio. How are you today, Enrique?
I am good. How are you?
Doing well. I was glad we caught up a couple times this year. We finally met in person at Transform, which was always exciting to meet people in real life that you've known for years.
Yeah.
And then we saw each other again at HR Tech, which was kind of a whirlwind event as well.
And both of those times very, serendipitously.
Yes.
Right. It just happened, I think, because it had to happen.
Yeah, eventually we knew that was going to happen. So it was great. It was actually my first Transform, and I was really, really impressed with that event.
Cool.
So you and I we'll talk about that as we get into it, because I want to, dig into the power of community and all the work that you're doing with Samara and the team. So before we dive into any of that, I wanted to hear a little bit about your background, just your path to, creating, Hacking HR, and now you work with Transform. So if you could give us a little bit about what brought you to this point in your career.
Yeah. Well, lots of news, actually. My tenure with Transform ended last week. We built the global movement, and it's been, not just was, it's been a very exciting journey for me to contribute to the mission of Transform, to help them build their global community of ambassadors. It was already time for me to be back in, full-time with Hacking HR. I feel that it's hard when you have to do so many things at the same time, trying to keep your mind, focused on this and that. And we with Hacking HR, we have this vision of what we want our events to be, our community to look like and feel like. And it was already time for me to, be back home. Hacking HR is home for me. And I'll say in a second why. So it was already time. So I am so thankful with, having spent 2.5 years in Transform, building the global community, meeting so many great people in person, going to the conference and building the community. And I am happy to be back home. So by training, I am an electronic engineer who, for series of events, ended up working in HR. Recently, I found somebody who said to me, when I was growing up, I wanted to be in HR. And I'm like, I think you're the first person that I ever meet who says that, because I think most of the people who end up in HR just happen to just end up in HR for some reason, not necessarily because that's what they wanted to do. So I ended in HR, and I practiced I was in corporate HR and practiced HR for maybe like 9 or 10 years. And then I created this community, Hacking HR, especially because I saw the big gap between technology and HR, and I wanted to close that gap. I realized as I started doing Hacking HR that the gap was not only tech and HR, but there were multiple other gaps in HR's capabilities and knowledge and inspiration and vision for the future. And that's why I created Hacking HR at the end of 2017. And it's been a phenomenal journey. I joined Transform in July of 2023 and to build their global community, to build their community of ambassadors. which I think I did, and it was I think it was a very exciting journey. And now I am back full time at home with Hacking HR. We have all these plans and ideas and programs for next year. So that's a little bit about me and what I built.
Yeah, no, amazing. I think when I first joined Hacking HR and we met, it was probably 2020, 2021, where I was really just pivoting into this space because I've actually never had an official HR role myself, although I've always been passionate about, people and human potential and things like that. And so one of the things that was amazing to me, because even then, I mean, you'd been at it for a while, but even then you were sort of a one man show in terms of orchestrating like all of these big. So for people who aren't familiar with some of Hacking HR's programs at the beginning, as the community was really growing in its earlier days, still a lot. I think you still have a lot of the same sort of approach to how you're sort of sharing knowledge with others and giving a lot of sort of everyday you know leaders an opportunity to speak on a variety of different topics, and it really was sort of a way to almost democratize people's visibility in terms of how they can bring their learnings from their corner of the world and their company, and just share those lessons learned and best practices, maybe explain some of the things that didn't work so that you're sharing those lessons with others. But I just really was impressed at the breadth of expertise across all of these topics across the talent lifecycle that are so important to so many people. And and I just remember distinctly like watching you sort of juggle this room full of laptops where you had like all these different sessions all managed from a different laptop. I'm like, he doesn't have anybody else. This is amazing. Like, how is he doing this? So it's just really, Enrique, really, I'm just really impressed with the dedication that you put into the community and the growth of the community. And, when I think about, HR and just the community being and staying human centric, you sort of epitomize that. And so I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing on behalf of everyone in the community.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And, when I started doing this, I saw that gap that I mentioned before between tech and HR, while simultaneously, obviously, looking around to see what was available for HR. And I was just shocked to see how expensive it was for an HR person to get access to top experts on their areas, to get access to events which cost in the thousands of dollars, or to get access to a learning program that costs thousands of dollars, right? And to me, coming from a poor background in a developing country, coming here and finding all of that when we have to be more resourceful from where I come from, because of lack of, a means to be more generous with the kind of solutions that you get access to and learning opportunities. I said to myself, this is ridiculous. I mean, like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And it is ridiculous that even when I acknowledge that in a country like the US where I live right now, I look at the opportunities that electronic engineers have to learn whatever they want to learn about in the world of tech. And there are millions, if not trillions of resources out there that are accessible or free, but that's not true for HR. So it bothered me. It really bothered me to my core. So I started doing all these programs, most of them free. That conference that you're referring to, that me managing all those laptops was it. It was in 2020 and 2021 when the pandemic started at the beginning of 2020. Most of the in-person events were canceling what they were doing, which I thought they were not just canceling their in-person events, which I understand obviously because of the pandemic, but they didn't do anything to serve the community in the meantime, which I found a massive betrayal of the people that they were serving, because people are looking for you for answers, for guidance, for coaching, for support. And what you're telling them is, if I don't make money off of you, then I don't do anything, you know? And at that moment, I said, we got to fill in this gap. And we put together our very first large conference in 2020. We had about 50,000 people attending. And that image that you remember, which became a little bit of an iconic moment for me, it literally was in my living room. I'm a minimalist, so I only have like one couch, or had one couch back then. Uh, and I bought all these plastic camping tables in Walmart. I put them up on my living room. I had to buy 8 computers because I only had 2 of my own. I bought 10 cheap computers in Walmart out of my own money, by the way, because we didn't have sponsors or anything back then. I put all these computers around in a little bit of a U-shaped kind of table in my living room. And I was like, like when we would start the breakout sessions, I would be running through all the computers like, start Zoom, start Zoom, start Zoom, start Zoom, start Zoom. And then at the end Zoom, end Zoom, end Zoom, end Zoom. So this was going on for like 3 or 4 days, right? And then I did the same thing again in 2021. I'm like, are you stupid or what? Why are you doing this to yourself, man? And that happened. And ever since, we had already been growing, but I think that became a moment of people knowing that we're doing this. Yes, we need to make money, and we have a membership now. We do some sponsorships, and we have programs that are not free because, it's a business that we have to grow and sustain over time. But I think it was that moment when most of the people that started knowing about Hacking HR realized that we were doing this for the right reason. We were doing this for the community. We were doing this to elevate HR, that yes, we do need resources to continue doing this, but it was never for the money, because otherwise I wouldn't have spent, the money that I spent buying computers and all of that, right? So yeah, that's been the journey. And one last thing is that, recently we've been like thinking a little bit more about our mission in Hacking HR. And there is one word that you mentioned that we didn't have in the mission. And one of my team members said to me in Hacking HR, why don't we have this word in the mission? And the word is democratize. And I said, that's interesting because, like we talk about this, but we don't have it written down in the actual mission of the company. What we're doing right now is democratizing access to the highest quality content that you can find in the world for the growth and development of HR, opportunities that are free and accessible, and the ones that are not, that are the most affordable opportunities that you can find in the market. I can promise to any one of your listeners that you will not find, nobody will find an offering like ours anywhere in the world, by the way, not just in America, anywhere in the world. You will not find an offering like ours, as extensive and holistic and comprehensive as it is, at the affordable rates that we have. I have spoken with people in countries like, I don't know, Brazil, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, where you would think like, well, maybe the programs are cheaper over there, because of their financial power to subscribe to some programs. And even their programs, one program cost more than our entire membership, right? And I'm like, that's what we have to do. Yes, I would love to, charge more, to make more money, and sustain our operation for longer. But we are here for the democratizing of access to great learning, great speakers, awesome experts, community, all of this at an affordable rate. So that's what we are. Yeah.
One of the things that, as you were talking, I was thinking about some of, I'll just call them, shiny objects out there as far as like, AI, programs. It's not just, I'm using that term kind of broadly. It's not just someone that basically put a wrapper around, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and is trying to sell it, for ridiculous, premium. I mean, even like to your point, some of the offerings that you might have, whether it's a certification or, an AI literacy, course, or maybe something in specific, domains within talent and HR. There's a lot of available resources for either very inexpensive, through a program like yours, or even just some of the vendors offering, courses. You can go, I think all the big technology platforms are offering, AI literacy something from Google and whatever. And so the flip side is you see, these, AI quote unquote experts just coming out of the woodwork with just, join my community, join my course for for 4 weeks. I'll hold your hand through all of this. We'll have an engaging community or whatever. And it's just like your point earlier, you could really spend thousands and thousands of dollars doing that and then joining all of these communities. I mean, I'm all for community, but you get to a point where you get almost diminishing returns because now your attention, I mean, I'm living through this now. Like, I'm a member of a lot of different communities, and the problem is it divides your attention. So some of this goes back to trust, not just like, am I getting, value from these courses, but do I trust this vendor? Do I trust this expert? Do I trust this community? Are they giving the right advice as far as how to embrace this technology? Are you taking people down a path where they're learning skills that are just sort of going to be commoditized, quickly? Or are you teaching them the skills that are going to allow them to, are you truly teaching them to fish, I guess is one analogy to use? Or are you just, I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of noise, out there.
I have a couple of thoughts about that. So the first one is just one reference to Hacking HR, right? We started in 2017. By then, there were like 3 HR groups, obviously SHRM being the legacy, obsolete one, and maybe a couple of others, right? And I think it was very natural for a lot of different groups to come up, not only after us, but also because of the pandemic, when people needed to do everything virtually, and it was very easy to set up a community virtually. What I always told the people that were doing that, and I encourage many of them, by the way, when they would ask me like, "Oh, do you think we're going to be competitors?" I'm like, no. I think first of all, the market is very large for all of us to coexist. Second, what you're doing is more niche than what we're doing, so I think we need you doing this. So I encourage them. What I always told these community founders was, please do not betray your people. Do not do this for money, only to find out that making money off of community is very hard. And a year later, you say, I'm done doing this, and you leave them hanging in there. That would be very unfair. And that's what many communities ended up doing, because they found that just by looking at other existing groups as encouragement for you to create yours was not enough to make yours successful, right? You needed to actually put in the effort and the time and the energy. And not everybody, some people thought that this was just like, piece of cake kind of thing, where you would just like say, I'm the new group, everybody join. That's not the way it works. So that's one thing, right? So the power of community is...
Hey, this is William Tincup, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Practitioner Corner podcast. It's a wonderful podcast about the journey, the paths of how practitioners, both HR and TA, kind of go from high school, college, all the way to where they are right now. Some of the things that they've learned, how they've been successful, people that thrive around them, etc. It's a fun podcast. You'll love it. You'll learn from it. Subscribe to it. Thanks.
Not just in bringing people together, it is also in understanding why you're doing it in the first place and being very transparent about that. That's one of the reasons why whenever I see an actual vendor creating a community, I always have mixed feelings about that. And I encourage them to do so. I think it's phenomenal that they are doing that. I just think that they have to be very clear that the reason why they are doing it is not always the reason of why a community exists. It is to have, at the top of the funnel, kind of thing, to warm up their leads and to bring more, eventually bring more people that become their customers. And that's fair. That is a legitimate goal. You just be clear that that's your goal and not the community itself, right? Now, I'm going to go to the second part of your comment, which was about AI. So I do teach a couple of programs on AI in Hacking HR. One of them is called Strategic AI Leadership. And this is pretty much the first thing that I tell people when they join the program. In the first class of the program, the first thing that I tell them is, this is not a program to be better prompters. If you want to be better prompters, you go to find all those experts on LinkedIn that are going to teach you how to better prompt. Prompting is already, if it's not already, it's getting to become an obsolete skill. Because when AI came out at the end of generative AI, at least the public-facing interface, with ChatGPT, because generative AI has existed for a long time. When the public interface came out at the end of 2022, and then it rose to what we see today throughout 2023, it was intelligent, but not that intelligent yet, because it was fed a lot of data, but there were little interactions with multiple, millions of humans like it has now. So you needed to explain really well, like a toddler, like a toddler that you have to explain word by word, context by context, what it is that you're asking them to do. We already, went over that stage. AI, the only thing that it doesn't do right now is read your mind, and it probably will tomorrow. It just, like you have to open and still ask it, this is what I want to do. Eventually it will be like, oh, I know what you want to do today. Because every day at 5 a.m., you ask me what to make for breakfast with the ingredients that you already have in your kitchen, right? I'm making it up. So most of these programs that you see out there, they are teaching people how to become users of AI, better prompters, and build some things using AI. But there's a very small number of programs, and mine is one of them, by the way, but there are multiple out there, but it's a very small number of programs compared to the overall amount of programs that are teaching people how to think in the age of AI, how to transform organizations in the age of AI, how to reskill their workforce for the age of AI, how to manage the consequences that we all know AI will have, which one of which will be, multiple people being laid off, and that is going to happen, or multiple people being transferred to jobs that they may not want to do, or they are not qualified to do because they haven't been reskilling or upskilling themselves. That's one of the things that we teach in the program that I do. And another thing is, which, by the way, I'm doing the program right now. We are about to enter into week number 4 of the 5-week program that I do. And week number 4, we're going to talk about governance and ethics in AI. And I have told my students, this is the most important class of the entire program, because we are moving so quickly in buying the new tools, in using the new tools, that little are we thinking about the implications of what we're doing with the tools. One example of that could be that some of the chats that you have with OpenAI are being indexed on Google. So a private conversation without you knowing it is being indexed on Google. Google and Claude are by default turned on when it comes to using your data to feed their systems. And most people don't even know that, by the way. And they may be dumping proprietary data from their companies into these systems without knowing that their data is being used to improve the large language model. Another thing that I tell people is your company needs to have an AI manifesto with just a small number to begin with of do's and don'ts. So your customers have to know how you're using their data. Your employees have to know how you're using their data and feeding that into an AI system. And most companies are not thinking about this. One last thing. I know, Bob, you have multiple other comments and questions, but one more thing. You can see the effect of these multi-billionaire companies on AI, and there are like 10 of them that own all the large language models, by the way, which is really scary. And you can see already the effect of that. The European Union AI Act that they have been working on for like 2 years and came into effect in August, they are now stripping away some of the fundamentals of the act. So they are stripping away some of the conditions, some of the policies, some of the mandates. You can tell the dark hand of these multi-billionaire companies behind the pressure to make that happen. That leaves all of us unprotected from the impact of AI, and that is very scary. So those are the things that I'm teaching in my program that you don't see in a lot of these experts talking about prompting AI or whatever else. So anyway, that was a long answer to your comment. Sorry about that.
No, I love it. And certainly, I'm a huge advocate for responsible use, responsible design, right? So everyone's a builder now, right? You can go into any of these tools and build stuff, but are you building things the right way? Do you know where the data, came from? Did it come from a legitimate and trusted source? I don't like hearing the word, oh, we scraped this from here, or we just found this in a database somewhere or whatever. Like I'm all for, open source, but even that has, the traceability and the observability to know like where, the provenance of that data that's feeding the model that you're
One
using.
quick thing about that, now that you're mentioning that, is one thing that I do tell my people in my programs is I ask them if they are aware of what the dark web is. And some of them know, and some of them like kind of like infer what that is, given the name. And then I ask them, do you know whether these large language models are being trained on data from the dark web? Most of them don't know. And the answer is yes. Sam Altman was asked this question, are you using dark web data to train your large language models? And they say, we're not limiting that, meaning the answer is yes. And that is very scary because that means that those fringe groups that obviously have become more and more prevalent these days, and creating their insanity and their conspiracy theories and their fringe theories on the dark web. Now we're training our large language models from where we're getting answers to our day-to-day questions from data from the dark web. One. And the second part of it is like I read something yesterday. I was really shocked by the numbers. I don't even know if that's the actual number, but I read something yesterday that said that 50% of the content being created now on the web is created by AI, which means that AI is creating the content that it fits back into itself.
Yeah.
That is insane.
Yes.
Because AI still has hallucinations, right? So imagine the insanity of saying something that is not true and then thinking that that's something that is not true is what you're using to train yourself. So this is scary, so we got to talk about these things beyond prompting and, the mundane day-to-day activities that you can do with AI.
Well, I think that last point, and I saw the same statistic. There's a graph somewhere, a time series graph that shows, the AI content versus human content, and they have crisscrossed.
Yes,
they have crossed, right? So now I think AI is over 50%. Sorry, over 50% of the internet content now is created by AI. So yes, it is sort of eating its tail. I don't know if that's the right analogy, but it's feeding on itself. And so it ties back to, I think, I'm sure what you cover also in your course, which is the need for us to maintain our critical thinking in all that we do. And of course, there's an overlying, concept of trust, right? Trust in the algorithm, trust in what AI is telling us, but also trust in each other and where those other people got their information. Is it their own, expertise, or are they just basically regurgitating, what an AI told them, and then, all bets are off, right? And then we just don't know what to believe anymore. And we see that all the time. But to your point about, sort of individuals protecting their own, their company's data or their own personal data, I think that's an incredibly important point because you wouldn't otherwise know, or maybe some people they don't think they care, but you tell them more specifically how that leak or that ingestion of your data could be used against you or for some other nefarious purpose. I think they would have second thoughts and start to look at the controls and the privacy, things like that. The other is, I mean, even just relating that to a talent use case, and you got to know who to trust. I joined a call recently. I joined as if I needed to join yet another community, but I joined one because I wanted to see, I'm always curious how people are teaching certain concepts and the types of questions that get asked. And this instructor was basically showing a bunch of recruiters how to take a resume and put it and have ChatGPT assess its, applicability or match, basically do a match against, job description. And I've seen people use tools like ChatGPT to compare like one resume to another. This does not end well, and that's not an appropriate way to have consistency and scalability and explainability within a talent acquisition team to know that we've treated everyone fairly and that, every application is reviewed under the same exact, sort of criteria. And it's just scary how some people are just defaulting to, the one tool they know how to use. But it goes back to your point before about communicating just some fundamental do's and don'ts, at least until you get that, that manifesto and that, the guidelines around here's appropriate use of the tools that we have available for you under our, infrastructure in our portfolio. And then here are some appropriate uses of where you might be using something that you personally used, but you've got to have those controls in place, and you've got to mitigate any of that sort of shadow AI, kind of usage, because otherwise you don't know where the weak, we've got, privacy. We went through this with privacy. We went through this with cybersecurity, and now we're going through it again at this third layer of responsible AI. And if you're not paying close attention to that, you don't necessarily know where the weak links are within your, employee, population within your infrastructure.
Yeah. You would expect that because all of those layers that you just talked about, we've gone through them in the past literally like 15 years. You would expect that we have the muscle of fear, a little trained to say, look at all the things that happened, in the early to mid 2000s, all the things that happened, with, viruses and hackers and whatnot, 10, 15 years ago. I mean, we should be careful about this, but I don't think we are, right? I mean, it's the same thing as saying we should have been prepared for a pandemic in 2020, given that it's already happened, but we were not, or as we were not to the extent that we should have been. Let me tell you a couple of things about the do's and don'ts, right? So just one fundamental number one, any company that has a knowledge workforce, meaning people who work in a computer, creating stuff in a computer, not people that are, doing it like not white collar, right? You have to assume that everybody's using AI in some capacity, whether it is to write an email or to write their entire dissertation for a PhD that will have an impact in the research they do for your company. Doesn't matter what it is. You have to assume that everybody who is creating something in a computer is using AI in some capacity. So now, thinking that that is a fact, and if it's not 100%, it's 90% of the people, but thinking of that as a fact, then you have to do something to protect your customers, to protect your employees, to protect your data, to protect your company. Now, let me go to the other side of this, right? And come back to this idea of protecting everything with the do's and don'ts that I'm talking about. There was a research put together maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. And I always say, I have to go back to who put together the research, and I never do it, so I don't remember, but I remember the numbers. Direct managers were asked about their use of AI. And something like 70% of the direct managers across the board, not just HR, but across the board, said that they were using AI for performance reviews, for decisions on promotions, compensation, firing and hiring, and feedback. So pretty much everything that has to do with interacting with another human at work, 70% of the managers said, I'm using AI for some of this. Those same managers, when they were asked, have you received training on how to properly use AI? Only 20% of them said yes. So that means that most of these managers using AI to make human decisions were not trained or have not been trained on how to properly use AI. If that is not a phenomenal liability to your company, not even accounting for the fact that it's inhuman, but let's just forget about that for 1 second and think about the liability for your company, the implications for your company, the reputation of your company, of a manager saying, AI told me to do this, therefore I did it, without questioning those results or those outputs. That is so dangerous, right? For the people and for the company. So let me go back to the center idea that I mentioned before. You have to assume that all of your managers are already using AI in some capacity. So your best bet right now to protect your people, your customers, your employees, and your company is to tell them how to do it properly. And you can train them all, but even if you don't train them all, the beginning of the beginning to me, when it comes to governance of AI, is just write 5 damn do's and 5 damn don'ts about what to do with AI in the workplace. One of them being, question everything that AI is telling you. AI hallucinates, meaning it makes shit up, right? So if that is the case, you have to question the data or the outputs that AI is suggesting to you. Then you have tools like Claude and Anthropic's large language model and OpenAI's large language model are a little bit different. But for people that are, and they can test this as they listen to what I'm saying, go and ask just provide a ridiculous, nonsensical, unreasonable statement to ChatGPT or to Claude. Claude will tell you, you are insane, not in that way, you're insane, stop this shit. And ChatGPT will tell you, you are into something. I think you're going in one very interesting direction, right? So if you're saying something insane to ChatGPT, and that's the tool that most people use now, if you're saying something insane as a manager to ChatGPT about your employees, and you as a manager, you are wrong, ChatGPT will not tell you that you are wrong. It will tell you, you are into something interesting here. Let me suggest some actions to move forward, right?
Hi, this is Stacey Harris.
And this is Terry Zipper, and we're the host of the two podcasts under the HR Huddle.
On Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, we uncover the latest trends, truths, and challenges from Sapient Insight Group's groundbreaking research and our analyst insights, serving up everything you need to know about HR tech with no sugarcoating.
And on HR, we have a problem. We tackle the toughest workplace challenges head on, offering you expert advice and actionable solutions to help HR leaders thrive in today's fast-changing world. Whether you want the scoop on tech or tools to solve people problems, we've got you covered.
Take a listen and subscribe. If you want to become part of our community, we'd love to see you.
So if you don't have that do or don't in your manifesto, then that manager will be validated about a wrong point of view or wrong opinion and will make a decision based on that. Once again, if that is not dangerous, then I don't freaking know what is. So those are the kinds of things that we should be talking about and not the stupid prompting. So you know what I'm saying?
Well, first of all, there's a really funny South Park episode, funny South Park fans around ChatGPT, and it's sycophantic responses, like everything. You can't say anything wrong, right? It's just like, oh,
you can't say anything wrong.
That's a really interesting point. Let's explore that. So that was kind of funny.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think one of the very first elements of the EU AI Act ties to what you're talking about in terms of the managers not having any kind of training. That was a requirement. That was the first requirement before the EU AI Act even went into full effect. Very first requirement was some level of AI literacy for people who are making decisions that affect others' lives and livelihoods. And that is any decision that relates to someone's upskilling potential, promotion potential, compensation increase, their sort of matching to a particular role, whether they're a good fit for a role, either as a candidate or as a current employee trying to move internally at a company. I don't know. People were up in arms about this because of the short notice that they were given, and they were scrambling to try to put some of those programs into effect. But it doesn't change the fact that this is exactly why, because people are just outsourcing their critical thinking when it comes to, if it sounds pretty good, no, I'll just stick that in someone's, performance review. They'll just, do this, do that. And it's like, you are the human in this loop, and you are the one that needs to be, the buck stops with you in terms of that decision. And so I just think we're on a really dangerous path. There's a huge disparity between companies claiming or publishing, like at least saying through surveys that they have an AI strategy, and the level of, when you talk to the employees about the training and the sort of literacy that they've been given, there's a huge gap there. And so I just don't know how you have an AI strategy. You might have an AI strategy that the CIO and the chief data officer and your CISO and so other people may have put together based on your data and analytics maturity, your infrastructure, your technical debt, and like all these other things, right? But if your people aren't ready, who is executing this strategy? Because it's not even non-technical people. I mean, even some of the technical people, your developers need to know that they're being responsible by design. Otherwise, they could be taking shortcuts and not double checking their work and not doing the proper evaluations of some of these algorithms before they get put into production. I mean, there's all kinds of checks and balances, and I just think there's again, that whole other sort of foundational level, along with data privacy and cybersecurity. There's a whole responsible AI layer there that needs continuous monitoring.
I have so many insights about what you just said, right up, and they all go in various directions. So let me begin with this one, and I'm gonna just say it and leave it in there because we can just talk about that for eternity. America was becoming more intelligent in the past 70 or 80 years until the mid-2000s. So we know what happened in the mid-2000s, the rise of social media and the rise of the smartphone. So those two things and the interconnection of the two of them together created an inflection point. And from that moment on, America started becoming dumber and dumber. Meaning, one of the indicators of us becoming dumber as a society is our declining critical thinking skills and creativity skills. So that was already happening even before the rise or the dawn of generative AI. That downward slope curve will now accelerate downward because of the rise of AI. I don't know if you're familiar. I'm sure that you're familiar. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with this. This study and research has been, phenomenally criticized. But I bet that when they do it again with a larger sample group, they will find the same thing. MIT was doing this research with groups of students, and they posed a problem to various groups of students. One group was told, you have to resolve this without using any technology or any tool. There was another group saying, you have to think about this problem, try to resolve it on your own, and then use AI to support your problem solving. And the other group was told, you will only use AI, you will not talk about it, you will not think about it, you will just use AI. All the groups, obviously the one using AI did it faster, but when they were asked a few hours later to narrate their thinking process to resolve that problem and to say the solution that they had come up with for that problem, none of them could remember what they had done with AI. Whereas the first group and the second group, they exactly remember what the process was. They were not able to come up with a final solution, but they were able to. They were thinking critically, right? And yes, that study has been criticized because it was a small sample, with a very limited, a scope of research. But I bet that when they do the same thing again with a larger scope of research and a larger group, they will find exactly the same thing. So yes, our critical thinking skills were already in decline, and they will that curve will become probably a free fall now that we are outsourcing our thinking, our creativity, our imagination, our strategic and critical thinking skills to AI, which is a massive problem in itself. But I'm going to leave that in there because that conversation can take us in multiple directions, which I would love to have. But I want to go back to something that you mentioned about the EU AI Act. So yes, on the training, most companies are, when they say that they have an AI strategy, what they have is how we're going to use the tools to become more efficient and more productive. That's the whole strategy can be summarized in that one sentence. They are not saying this is how we will have an impact in society. This is how this is going to have an impact on our employees and our customers. This is how we're going to train our employees to be upskilled for the age of AI, whether it is in the roles that they have now or in new roles that will be created or in roles that they will be transferred to. All they have is a strategy that can be summarized in the one line of, we're using AI to make more money for a few and to do so without regards for the people. So more efficiency and more productivity. Now, there's another thing that is also in the EU AI Act. And the other thing is that you, as a company or anybody using AI, you are responsible for what happens if you use AI, whether it is your own tool that you developed or it's a vendor of a vendor of a vendor of a vendor, right? So right now, there are multiple cases in litigation because some teenagers were using AI tools that, are just like an interface of OpenAI, large language model, or whatever they're using. Some of these teenagers ended up killing themselves, and there are two names out there, and people, I don't want to talk about them because they are in litigation right now. People can go to Google and find them. And so it's not just the tool that is responsible for what happened, and it is also the large language model and all the vendors down the road that they are using. This is EU AI Act. So if you think that you're using an AI tool to do anything that you want to do, and if the AI tool is telling you to do something and you don't want to, and you do that something and it ends up having negative consequences, and you will just say, if you get sued, it was this tool, you're making a mistake because you are equally responsible as they are for whatever happens, right? And we're not training people on this. We got to be training people on this very fact that I'm just talking about. So anyway, I think the opportunity of the age of AI is phenomenal. I love the unleashing of human potential with AI, but I am also extremely concerned about the way we're doing things. And one last thought. When people ask, and they ask me this question very often in my program, who should be leading AI in our company? The CTO, the CIO? And I say, those are the actual ones that should not be leading the age of AI in your company. And I say this, I'm an electronic engineer, so I worked many years as a technologist, pure technology, and I can tell you that us technologists think about technology and the world begins and ends in the technology. Little do we think about the implications of that outside of that technology world. So if you think a software developer that is embedding an AI tool in your company is thinking about the biases that your data has, is thinking about governance, is thinking about all these components, I think you're making a massive mistake. That's one of the exercises that we do in my program is we together create what I call an Office of Strategic AI Leadership. We do that exercise together. And what we say is, unless you work in a massive company that has a chief AI officer, and there are only like 50 companies like that in the world, most companies will have to pull together a team that is diverse in terms of functional areas to lead that office. And it cannot be just the technologies. HR has to be there, finance has to be there, legal has to be there, marketing has to be there, saying like, hey, yeah, the tool is great, but I'm thinking from this perspective, I'm thinking from that perspective, right? You need all of these folks in that one office or whatever you want to call it, PMO, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I think I typically, on the responsible AI side, I typically would recommend that there be, a governance committee, cognitively diverse, governance committee, ethics committee. But you're right. Ideally you have like a full blown like COE kind of, structure where you're bringing together these leaders because, you may have a progressive and very sort of empathetic, data, leader who understands, some of these fundamentals, who's maybe been positioning the organization properly in terms of its, data and analytics maturity and has, but that is probably even more rare than having a CAIO in your company.
Very rare.
Yeah.
Very rare. Yeah.
But I do think those things are really important, and the CHRO cannot relinquish, control for this because it really is, I guess it's another, domain or another angle where I would say this needs to be human centric, and therefore, the head of people and talent really needs to be the primary driver of a lot of what needs to happen here. So I definitely appreciate all those points. I think we have a lot of work to do here. Even thinking about, that percentage of companies who say they have an AI strategy, when we think about true AI and its potential, it's not efficiency and productivity stuff. It's like we really need to think about how we're redesigning roles and how we're reimagining how work actually gets done. And that's going to lead to, obviously, you've got to bring in all your skills-based, work, understanding where your gaps really are. You need to understand the trajectory of AI's, capabilities and what are those human, durable skills that we need to guide the AI organization forward. You also need to be able to mitigate all these risks that we're talking about, as well as drive innovation, right? So I talk about that in terms of like responsible innovation, right? So you need to play defense and mitigate risk and adverse impact, but you also need to be able to, develop things in a responsible way so that you continue to innovate and grow the organization. So there's a lot on everyone's plate. Yeah. So it's hard to juggle it all, but I think you're right to focus your students on this aspect of it, because, if you can have a pipeline of solutions that have been developed and conceived in a responsible fashion, there's a lot of power in doing that. So do it right. Do it right the first time.
Do it right. Yeah.
So Enrique, yeah, you're right. We could probably keep talking for hours, but I want to start to wrap things up. And so one of the things I like to ask my guests is like, we talk a lot about what's going on in the future of work and how all this is evolving. But even in our personal lives, obviously people are playing with AI day in and day out. Even kids young kids are using AI, whether they tell people they're using it or not. But are there just curious if there's any like particular, use cases or tools that you use in your personal life that you are particularly, sort of wowed by or concerned about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know we need to kind of wrap up. So anything personal that you're intrigued by on the AI front?
Well, I have a policy of sorts for my Hacking HR team. And this is the policy. Do not do anything without using AI. Do not deliver anything that you don't have human oversight of or on. What this means is that I encourage my team to use AI as much as they can for whatever they need, but they can't ever ship anything out to the public or to me that has been fully created just by AI without their, critical thinking in between, right? So we use AI a lot in Hacking HR. I myself use it for everything. In all honesty, I don't know what I would do with AI right now, given that, for anything from creating an entire new program for whatever we do to writing an email that is just a response to a friend that ended up being a long email. And I'm like, oh, let me get some help with AI. I use it for everything. One of the tools that I use the most these days is a tool called Replit. It's a tool to create apps and websites. And, I've been in this work for a while, and we have done all this work using software designers before. Now we can use a lot of this using Replit, and it's not only extremely fast, cheap, but even if it wasn't that, the fact that we can change whatever we want to change in like half a second, rather than sending an email to a designer and say, change the color of the bottom from dark blue to light blue, and then them taking 2 days to respond to that. Now we can do it in half a second.
Right.
That to me is incredibly powerful, and we are entirely redoing all our technology ecosystem with multiple AI tools, one of which is Replit. So I am excited to see these things. I recently read that now you can host your own personal large language model in your computer. So that is phenomenal to me because, when OpenAI came to exist, developing a large language model would have cost $100 million, right? Now you can have your own personal large language model. I don't know if that's going to be dangerous, as in you creating your own thing and being in this echo chamber forever. But I find it interesting for those of us who know how to use AI, want to rely more on, your own database kind of thing. So anyway, that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, there's probably pros and cons to that. So we'll have to.
There sure are, yes.
Conversation for another time. We'll check back in next year and see how that's going.
Yes.
Enrique, thank you so much for spending so much time with me. Some great insights that my listeners will really appreciate. And if there's anything coming up with Hacking HR, I'll definitely include a link to the community in the show notes. And if there's anything else you want me to include, just let me know. But thank you again for your time. Good to see you.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Likewise. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, man.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.